Hello, Minneapolis. How's everybody doing here? I love that. I'm not from here. I love this frickin' city, and I love everything you guys do with it. So proud to be here presenting to you. I'm Robert Wagner. I am not the person who is doing the "what the fuck is CISA doing now" talk. Unfortunately, some black vans pulled up outside just before his no. He couldn't make it, so I will be presenting on overcoming the cybersecurity poverty line. So quick introduction, Robert Wagner, Mr. Minion on what's left of the cesspool that's called Twitter. Also on InfoSec Exchange. I'm an advisory CISO. I'm working with a couple of startups right now. As far as their offering goes, mostly because I got laid off last year with a million other people. So yeah, so for everybody out there, the good news, I'm getting interviews like left and right. So the market's opening up. Hopefully for anybody else that got laid off, you're seeing the same. But it's not like I'm not busy. So I'm on the board of Hack for Kids, which is an organization that teaches kids about internet safety, security, and ethics. We use the lure of hacking is cool to really teach them STEM skills. So it's kind of like putting cheese on their vegetables. We have a big event in Chicago every year, and we also help other conferences run a kids track. So if you know a conference that could use a kids track, I don't think this is the right one for that, but we do it for GrrCon, NOLACon, and other places. I'm on the board of my local ISSA in Chicago. I'm on the board of the Chicago CISO of the Year. I'm a co-organizer of BSides. We got some BSides people out there. Yeah, represent. Which is a great networking group in Chicago, and also helped put on BSides 312 this year. It was the first inaugural for BSides 312. Chicago is now in a very small club of cities that actually have 2 BSides per year. So there's BSides Chicago, which is another great event in Chicago. They usually happen in the fall. We're in the spring. We were intended to be the B-side of ThoughtCon, but as many of you may know, ThoughtCon went to an every other year format, so we stood it up and there was no ThoughtCon. We still are planning on doing it when there is a ThoughtCon every other year though, so feel free to join us. I suck at social media, so if you want to take pictures and post it, go right ahead, because I'm terrible at that. But also to say it's okay to take pictures of like slides and stuff. I also love dogs and motorcycling, if you couldn't tell. So that was my boy. He rode with me for about 14 years and was just a fantastic dog. But I wrote this talk because I've worked with everything from very large organizations. I used to work for TransUnion and a bank that eventually got absorbed by Bank of America. And I've worked with very small organizations. And what I keep seeing over and over again is the small organizations are making mistakes on 2 fronts. One, they keep trying to do exactly what the large organizations do, which is not always a good idea, right? They can't always do what large orgs do. But the other thing that the mistake that they're making is they also have learned nothing from the mistakes we in the large organizations made. I mean, for 20 years, we've been running up against walls, figuring out problems, and solving those problems, and yet the small organizations are making the same problems I saw large organizations making 20 years ago. So what I wanted to do was put together a bunch of curated advice, really, for small organizations who are working on pretty slim budgets for security. It's hard for them to do the right thing. A lot of them may have maybe 2 or 3 security people. They may have one person who's in IT that also has to do the security thing. And that's tough. It is really tough. And usually they have no idea which buckets to even focus on as far as raising the bar for their security. To quote Thomas Edison, there is a better way for everything, find it. Those of you that know his background knows that the way he found it was to steal it from everybody else. So by all means, steal it from me, and hopefully you'll take a couple of nuggets of wisdom home with you today. So the cybersecurity poverty line is actually a term coined by Wendy Nather back in 2010. And it is still one of the most significant problems for most organizations today. It's the line below which most organizations not only can't be effectively protected, it's that they can't even comply with basic regulations. They can't do even the most basic of hygiene within their security hygiene within their organization. And if you see the curve of the Fortune, 1,000 or so, and who is actually above that poverty line, it's a pretty small number. Somewhere just a little bit after the Fortune 200-ish, companies start dipping below that poverty line, and that's really sad. The primary hurdles that Wendy identified was money, which is obvious, right? A lot of these companies just don't have the budget. Expertise, meaning the people to actually make security work within the organization. Capability, which is often just having the people to do the expertise within the organization. And the fourth one was one actually that I hadn't thought about, but I've seen over and over again, and that's influence. And probably one of the best ways I've seen a CISO use influence that you wouldn't have thought about. Jason Whitty, who used to be the CISO for US Bank right here, on his staff, and of course he was above the poverty line, he actually had a person on staff who was an expert at doing PowerPoint presentations. They had, you're right, they had an arts degree. They knew nothing about security, but the difference between those horrible reports geeks make when they want to focus on what's wrong versus what someone with an artistic background in communicating to the board what's really going on with your security organization is night and day. So that was brilliant to have him on, that person on staff for him to just make communication better between security and the board. How important is this, right? For small businesses. The impact was surprising to me. So as I was doing my research, I found that, and so this is like from 2021, so this is, and the numbers from what I've seen are actually going up, but attacks on targeting small to medium businesses, enterprises, was 46% of all attacks, and it's moving even further and further that way, because as the big organizations get better and better at what they do, it's a lot easier to just nail a whole bunch of smaller organizations and get your money that way than try and focus on a couple of large organizations. And that's really bad, because while these SMEs might have averaged a loss of $200,000 per firm, which for the big boys, that's not really that big of a deal, 60% of the SME victims, just for that $200,000, because of the tight margins they're on, went out of business 6 months after the incident. And that's pretty bad. So where do we start? So who hates this Venn diagram by now? Yeah, I hate it too. But one of the reasons I hate it the most is because it never looks all pretty like this, right? We've got people, process, and technology, right? But most organizations are tempted, especially smaller ones, to focus on which aspect? They usually focus right here on technology, right? They want a blinky box to fix all the problems, and that is so bad. Because what does this Venn diagram really look like at most organizations? It looks like this, and this is not how you want to describe your security program, right? This is bad. Nobody wants a Mickey Mouse security program in their organization, except for maybe Disney. I don't know. Shh, we didn't say that. I did not say any trademarkable things. Let's start then with the most important part, right? Which is the people, and it's tough. It's really tough for small organizations. So most small orgs can't even afford. I hear this a lot. Talent is hard to find. Is it really though? Is it hard to find? Maybe, but maybe you're going about it the wrong way too. So one of the first places, of course, is some sort of CISO. And with the new SEC rulings, a lot of companies are wondering, do I need a CISO? And if I need a CISO, can I get away with a virtual CISO? Or do I need a full-fledged CISO? A lot of people probably don't even need the CISO, but they're misinterpreting the SEC rulings. So looking into that first is going to be key. But if you do find that you need somebody in some sort of CISO capacity, you may be only be able to afford a vCISO, and that's not bad. But make sure you know what you're looking for. You really need a CISO that speaks in business terms. I have a friend who was also searching for an internal CISO role, and he said that he had just been on an interview where they asked him, wow, your background's really great. What types of firewalls do you know how to configure? Right? To the CISO. or potential CISO. And he's like, well, I actually do know several, but that's really going to take away from the important part of the job, which would be writing your policies and making sure that things are running smoothly as far as the program goes. So business is a far better focus for that virtual CISO. The very first question that they should be asking you as a potential candidate to be your vCISO is, how does this company operate? How do we make money? What is the real way this business operates? They should have some experience in incident response, at least knowing how to build an incident response program, or how to maybe create the correct retainers for an incident response offering that they might hire or something like that. They should definitely know compliance well enough to at least say, this applies to us, this doesn't, like that SEC ruling. And then actually be able to create realistic objectives for risk and vulnerability. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I see so many, even at the large enterprise level, people really failing when it comes to risk and how to measure it. So we'll talk about some ways to improve upon that. So after the CISO, now we have to worry about what this security team might look like, right? And my biggest piece of advice to any small organization is stop chasing unicorns, right? Who here knows like some security unicorns that are like just these amazing people that can just about do anything, they can pretty much, yeah, right? So unicorns are great in a large organization where you can just stick them in a room and let them go. A lot of unicorns are assholes. And an asshole is not what you need on a team of 3 people, right? You need people that are really willing to just say, hey, I'm willing to work as a team. I might even not know this stuff, but let's work together and figure it out, instead of being the kind of person that either knows it all or pretends to know it all, which is not great for a team dynamic. So stop chasing the unicorns. Instead, maybe hire a few strategic leads. Somebody who's really got a high EQ, right? Who knows how to work with people, how to encourage them, how to lift them up. And then start looking at maybe people coming just out of college, maybe they're still in college, but can be interns now. And let those leaders lead by example and build them up. They do need to run some interference for these inexperienced folks as far as the business politics, the stupid things that you don't expect from an organization, but I see all the time. Like even with some of the organizations I volunteer for, I'll meet folks that are just coming up through the ranks, maybe getting their first security job, and I'm like, hey, are you coming to the ISSA meeting at 3 p.m. on Thursday? And they're like, oh, no, I can't. My boss says that would be a waste of my time. I should be here in the SOC. And I'm just like, oh my fucking God, are you kidding me? That's literally their job, is to learn how to be better. And we learn so much better when we're interacting with others and seeing where they're achieving, where they're failing, stuff like that. So that interaction with your peers, especially at a small org, who might not be able to afford the best training for those folks, that's going to be key. So create a low-cost army, a bunch of interns, temp to hires, entry-level folks, whatever it is, and start nurturing that talent. Now, people are going to complain about that. They're going to be like, oh, well, if I train them, they're just going to leave. Yeah, damn right they are. Some of them will. But one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a mentor was train them so well they could leave, but treat them so damn well that they stay. Right? Not all of them are going to stay, but some of them will stay. And those will become your next leaders. And they'll bring up the next group and the next group. And you just keep going through that. Some even more forward-thinking leaders at small organizations develop relationships with the large enterprises and act as a farm team. Hey, you know what? We're going to cooperate with you. I'll get you some folks that have some experience, and maybe you help me a little bit out with whatever our business dealing is together, right? Maybe we get a discount here, or you help feed into the program there, getting something back from those large organizations, maybe even some threat intelligence that you wouldn't normally get. Something like that, where you have a cooperative agreement with a large organization where it doesn't really cost anybody a whole lot, can be a really powerful way to approach that problem. And then the boss is going to have to justify whatever training you do bring to the business, or the things like going to meetups and stuff like that. And really encourage, especially the interaction like this, for events like this, like events for BurbSec. I love our BurbSec community. For the price of a beer, I get to sit with red teamers every month and hear how they're getting into organizations. And by the way, they're bored as shit because they get into organizations the same damn way every single time. But it still validates your knowledge. As a defender, as a blue teamer, it validates that you're getting the right focus. So for the practitioners to also, if they're on the blue team, be hearing from the red team on how they're getting in really helps level up their game without them having to be a pen tester in the first place. And they can't do it all. I'd also recommend, this crowd probably knows this, but looking for talent in your existing employees. Like if the organization has a Linux admin, damn, fucking Linux admins are great at security. All you teach them is about what they don't know about what they've already been doing, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, I'll fix that right away. So look for that kind of talent. There's also a big opportunity here with diversity hiring. And the thing that especially small orgs, but I see it in large orgs all the time too, is simply changing the freaking language of the way we describe jobs. This is so key. So in doing my research, I found out that neutral language is key, but we don't even know that we're doing language the wrong way. Words like self-reliant or lead are literally coded for masculinity. And coded for masculinity means we want a guy in this role. Even if they're not thinking it, it's often subconscious. They don't know that they're stating things in ways that discourage women from applying. I even found out that the word high energy means old people need not apply, right? It's literally a way of saying we want someone who we can really beat up and exhaust, and we know you old people aren't going to do it, so don't frickin' apply for this job. So the helpful thing here is and I don't know if I have this on the next slide. Do I? Yeah, oh, sorry, so I'll mention that in a minute on the slide. One of the key things is just to get rid of the laundry list in those job descriptions. Don't put a frickin' laundry list of things that you would like them to have. Because the problem you run into is while most men will typically apply for the job if they fit about 60% of that laundry list, most women will not unless they match 100% of that list, which means, again, you're telling women, don't apply here, because we don't, right? You don't know it, but you're literally discouraging women from applying and denying yourself some amazing talent. So watch for that kind of thing. Another way that you can help there, and hiring bias training is not that expensive. Too often I see organizations just go, hey, you, and you're going to interview the next round of candidates for this job, even if those people have no training in interviewing at all. How many people have been in some of those interviews where, yeah, the interviewer's a complete idiot? I had a person actually tell me that he was going through an interview process, and he started asking a lot of questions towards the end of the hour that they were scheduled for. And the interviewer went, hey, hold on. Like, way too many questions here. I'm not being interviewed, you are. Yeah, right? Yeah, that is how unprepared that interviewer was for the job at hand. By hiring bias, and it comes in so many different ways, and it affects us without knowing how we're actually affecting the whole hiring process. So a little bit of unconscious bias training just to rewire the brain can do a world of good. And then just doing simple things like evaluating resumes blindly, so you don't know what the race or the sex of the person that's interviewing is, at least for that first round of the resumes themselves. And then consider non-traditional backgrounds. Musicians have been some of the best security analysts I've ever met. And you know why? Music is math and patterns. And those people are excellent at applying those things that they've learned in music to the patterns in things like logs and intrusion events and things like that. I know a woman who, before she became a security pen tester, used to be a nanny. Now, if you had looked at her resume, you'd been like, no, hell no, I'm not hiring this person. She's freaking amazing at what she does, and all she needed was that one chance to actually do it. So I'm so glad she got the chance. How many other people don't? And that's what you need to really think about here is they don't have to have a degree in InfoSec to be a great hire. And there's other really fantastic payoffs for hiring in a diverse way, putting together a diverse team. In just business, we're not even talking about security. Companies outprofit, diverse companies outprofit the ones that aren't by 36%, and they end up with 90% higher in their innovation revenues. Isn't security another really great place for innovation? Isn't this another place where we want people that don't necessarily think exactly like each other on that team, especially on a small team of 3 people? Having different perspectives is worth its weight in gold when you're that tiny. So now let's talk. We're getting some people in. Now we got to level them up, right? I mean, we can't just say, here you go. We have to give them some kind of training. And how many of these organizations can actually afford SANS training? When I went to SANS, I think it was like $4,500. What's a SANS class now? $10,000, yeah. So it's expensive. We had to take turns. Even when I was working for the bank, it was like, okay, you two can go to SANS this year, and you two can go to SANS next year. At a small organization, they're probably not. And I love my training, don't get me wrong, but not everybody can afford it. So there's ways that we can get around that, though. So the CISA, besides abducting speakers, also has a Cyber Essential toolkit that's actually pretty helpful. Cyber Readiness Institute has some good training as well. For certain candidates, SANS, based on need, has the SANS Cyber Aces, which is particularly focused on women and lifting them up. So a great one if you actually are starting to diversify your workforce. And then, of course, security BSides and other fantastic security conversations. Like, yes. Oh, fantastic. That's great. When is it going to be? All right, so we're going to have another BSides right here in Minnie in August. BSidesTC.org. Thank you very much for that. And that's fantastic. So now as we're building out, a lot of large companies have the luxury of having a tiered SOC, right? You've got your tier 1 analysts, your tier 2 analysts, 3, and they just escalate as the problem gets harder and harder. That's probably not going to work on a team of 3. But one thing you can start building out is something we've kind of dubbed a fusion SOC. So you're ditching the tiered structure and instead focusing on various security tasks. And what you're really trying to tease out is who's good at what. So you have people if you get advanced enough that you're doing malware analysis, maybe someone's doing malware analysis, maybe someone's doing log analysis, maybe someone's just watching the security alerts. And you let them get a little good at it, and then you have them rotate. And the person that was just doing it has to teach the next person how to do their job. Because teaching someone how to do something is one of the best ways to learn. So as they're transferring the responsibilities throughout, they'll teach the peers as they rotate, and you'll likely get some people that go, oh man, I love doing this one thing. I would love to do this thing most of the time. And that they become the expert around that. Now, you might get a lot of people fighting over the same thing, so you're going to have to watch out if you only have one thing that's exciting and everything else sucks. But if you manage it appropriately, you can make all the different tasks a growth experience for these analysts. So then once we've got this team up and going, what's the next four-letter word we have to deal with out there? User, right? So our users are often one of our biggest security holes. We love our users. We fight for the users like Tron, right? But we have to help them out. And it turns out that 45% of employees receive no security training whatsoever from their employers. And 62% of those, and I think that's probably even higher, but 64% according to the stat that I found, do not provide enough security awareness to receive any benefits. And what I imagine that to be is some of the security awareness training I've been through, which was so bad I'd rather rub glass in my eyes than watch those videos again. But you know, you go through it once a year, right? Here's some security awareness training. Watch the videos, answer the question. You don't hear about it for another year. That's not an effective way. I see some new companies coming out that are doing security awareness training where it's a trickle. You know, they just kind of deal up a little bit of information or a little bit of a test for users that they can digest easily and quickly, maybe in 5 minutes or something like that. But it comes out throughout the year to act as a constant reminder for them that they should be thinking about these things. So that's one of the ways you can approach it. They are, however, because of compliance reasons, probably going to need some sort of formal security awareness training. And there's tons of free resources for that. So Amazon, the security awareness training they do for their own org is freely available online for anybody to go through. If you are by compliance beholden to put your employees through security awareness training, they can literally just go through that program and get as good as Amazon gets. There's other things available too, though. So Google has a course. You may have part of your workforce, let's say you're manufacturing. Some of your employees may not have a computer to take security awareness training. EdApp is a mobile-based app where people can take at least the first level of basics for free. Now if you go further than that, they're a freemium-based model, so they'll start charging you. But at least those basics are available even down to the factory-level worker, who at this point, at least in the U.S., probably has a phone, so you can get it out to that workforce as well. Backdoors and breaches, here everybody probably knows it, but a great tabletop exercise, which the hardest part about tabletop exercise is writing the tabletop exercise. They've already done it for you, so it's not going to be specific to your organization, but with a little bit of tweaking, you can make it more specific to your organization. NIST has some free training out there. There's even an organization called Wizard. And then one of the best security awareness training ideas I've ever heard came from Ben 10. I don't know if folks know Ben 10, Ben 0XA. Ben did a presentation back in like 2014 at DerbyCon. And the concept was pretty simple. He just said to his organization, hey, listen, you know that security awareness training you were supposed to go through? You're going to start seeing security-related things around the organization. Anybody who reports one of those things, whatever thing they see first, reports that thing first, gets maybe like, I don't know, $5 gift certificate to Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. But he's going to keep score, and whoever gets the most points by the end of the week gets a $200 gift certificate. So for a couple $100, he turned people into competitive beasts. People were going, oh, I saw the CISO walking through the org and they didn't have their badge on, right? And that's against policy. You can't do that. Someone reported a strange black box that they just saw outside the side door. It was a rodent control box. But they were starting to pay attention to things. And really, the best result he got came 15 minutes after he announced the competition. He got a call from a woman who was very excited. She's like, Ben, I see one of your things. And he's like, we haven't started yet. What thing do you see? And she's like, oh, this thing pops up on my computer every once in a while. It says, click here to authorize access or something like that. Yeah. And he's like, how long have you been seeing that for? And she's like, oh, like 6 months now. Yeah, so he turned his people into carbon-based intrusion detection systems, they had a real incident on their hands 15 minutes into the contest. The one caveat I will give you though is I've had people say, yeah, we did that at org too, and it worked great. But then people started downloading Nessus to scan things so they could tell me about vulnerability. Yeah. If your users can download Nessus and scan your organization, you might have some foundational stuff there that you need to fix first. But I mean, kudos to them for being that excited about it, right? I mean, I love that people were getting engaged by something as simple as a competition. As you're building this out too, it's going to be key to have a really healthy security culture. So one of the key things for a healthy culture, and we've seen big organizations go through this, which is never treat security awareness training as a punishment, right? Boy, when we first started doing things like phishing our own organizations, we saw a lot of really nasty things going on. Large organizations were like posting the list of people that failed the phishing test, right? Really humiliating people. Humiliation is not a really great way to encourage people to be concerned about the security of your own organization. We see other things too, like the policy's not being applied fairly, right? You have to use two-factor authentication, but you don't because you're the CEO, and we're not going to do that. You don't want to do. Okay, it's okay if you don't want to do that. You're not very important to the org anyway, right? What could possibly happen with your account as a CEO? So applying things fairly is great. Letting just regular training to identify just risks, right? Things that might be important to the organization as far as a risk goes. People can't tell you if there's a risk in the org if they don't know what a risk looks like. Asking employees and encouraging them to just ask for help when they don't know why. If people have to do multi-factor, a lot of the first time, it can be a pain at the beginning, right? It's kind of a pain in the ass. Not everything always works right. And people will get angry and frustrated. They're like, why do I have to do this? Simply showing them how an exploit works and how that stops that exploit often is all they need. And then they go, oh, okay, yeah, it's a pain in the butt, but I see why we're doing this now. Just going, here, take this MFA and use it, and not explaining to them why is not productive. So making training fun and personal, things like the gamifying security, or even doing like a lunch and learn and showing people how to lock down things like their home router, how to maybe change the default name and password, especially on some of the older equipment, can be key to just helping people out and getting them engaged. Getting their brain thinking about how to secure their own stuff is often a great way for them to also help secure your stuff. And then same standards, right? We talked about that. So insider threat, of course, is a big problem for any organization. It can actually be an easier problem to solve at a small org because everybody knows each other, right? Everybody can see, there's some basic government resources out there just to teach people about a potential insider risk before they become a threat. Things like changes in behavior, right? Someone's also all of a sudden really depressed or argumentative or even verbally violent. That could be a disgruntled employee, and a disgruntled employee can often turn into that insider threat for you, right? So getting ahead of that, realizing that there's a problem, and maybe even reaching out to the employee to find out what's going on with their life, right? Maybe they, had a huge medical expense in their organization at their home, and now they're struggling. Finding out what's going on is sometimes all it takes to mitigate that threat. Now, you do have to watch out. Small companies also have a lot of very small organization politics. You don't want this to turn into a weapon that one employee uses to try and injure another employee. So be careful about that kind of thing. It can happen, but for the most part, just some simple discussions about what makes a disgruntled employee and what you should be looking for is all you really need there. So now that we're past people, let's talk a little bit about process. I was first introduced to the critical controls when it was the SANS, 20 critical controls, but now it has more. It's down to 18, and it's CIS that's taken it over. The CIS has added something new just recently called implementation groups. Because at the end of the day, the 18 critical controls are still a lot for an organization to even accomplish, much less just mentally digest. So what the implementation groups are a way for you to work through levels of maturity as you approach the different controls. So if you take a look at control number 1, we see that implementation group 1, to reach this level of maturity, is only these first 2 controls here, all right? And who can't create an easily identifiable asset database, right? Everybody's, no. But the point is that that's hard enough. Maybe you're just going to be focusing on that. And realistically, the other thing, and I don't think the CIS does a really good job at this. Just because they're numbered 1 through 18 doesn't mean you have to start with number 1. We all know that getting your assets under control is oh man, it's tough, right? It's not easy to do. A small organization might, maybe, it depends, but it depends on sometimes small organizations can still have a ton of assets, and getting control of those assets isn't going to necessarily be easy. But what they should be focusing on is where they're likely to get hit first, right? So small orgs are probably going to get hit with control number 9, right? They're going to get hit through their email or web browser, and they're going to get hit by not having the right malware defenses. So maybe you go through implementation group 1 for 9 and 10 first to stop the hemorrhaging, and then maybe start taking a look at getting control of your assets as a maturity program within just implementation group 1. We talked about risk a little bit earlier. We need better ways of talking about risk, right? We as an industry just suck at talking about risk. I mean, I remember people used to go in with like a stack this high of just the vulnerability report and took that into like the executive. Yeah, that's not cutting it. And according to Forrester, so 40% of global risk and compliance decision makers are improvising risk management. And what does improvising mean? They're guessing. They're guessing at what their risk management numbers are and what they should be doing and how it should be done. Hope is not a strategy, so we need better ways to do that. And there are better ways. This, however, is not one of them. So as far back as, 2008, 2007, people were already writing treatises about why risk matrices suck. Not only do they suck, they can be worse than useless. And the reason they're worse than useless is they don't give you any real qualified measurements in risk anyway, but they make you think like you're doing good risk. Oh, look, I've got a matrix. I must be doing risk right. And that can give you sort of a false sense of security. So moving away from this is a good idea. I've seen several different ways. One of the most interesting is a gentleman by the name of Douglas Hubbard, who actually uses Monte Carlo simulations and good estimating. And he says the number one problem is that we suck as estimators. So he has an online tool. It's the Monte Carlo simulation tool is free. The estimation tool is not free, but it's not expensive. And it just does a simple calibration of people so that they can think better about how they estimate things. But by taking the various risk things and giving a good estimation of the probability and the cost associated with that probability. And by the way, your probability estimations go up better based on the history of your own org. If you already know how many times you've gotten hit by ransomware in the last 5 years, you can estimate pretty well the likelihood of it happening again. And you already probably know how much money that cost you. If you don't, There's some great databases out there that have all that data for you, that have the probability of being hit, how many organizations got hit, and what it cost them. So with that, you can now go talk to the board in terms of not risk, but money. Yeah, basically, you can say to the board, okay, what is your appetite for us losing, in terms of probability, losing $1,000 this year to a security event? And most organizations, $1,000, okay, we accept up to a 90% probability or 98% probability of us losing $1,000. We're okay with that, even at 98%. Okay, now how about 5 million? All right, yeah, I want to see that probability brought down to maybe 5%, lower, whatever it is. And then based on what they said their appetite is versus what you can fairly well estimate the likelihood of happening, you can say, hey, the likelihood is above what you've told me is acceptable in terms of money, which we can really measure. And now you can come to them and say, and to mitigate this risk, it's going to cost this much money. That's a much better conversation to have with your executive board than, we've got 9 million vulnerabilities and we need $9 million to fix it, right? That usually doesn't go over well. Basic hygiene, which is what we want to hopefully get people to, as that cybersecurity poverty line is. So some of the basic hygiene things, and this is where people in small orgs make kind of the same mistakes we were making at large organizations. If they have to do things like a risk or threat assessment, right? If by compliance measures they have to actually have a pen test, they usually don't do it right. They usually go, oh, well, we'll call some pen testing company and we'll tell them to do it. And what happens if you have no idea what you're doing and you call? What'll happen is that, especially if it's like an Accenture or something like that, they're just going to stick a 20-something with Tenable on a computer and go, hey, we scanned you, that was our pen test, pay us $10,000. Really understanding what a pen test should be and what to get out of it is key, and it should always be predicated by an actual security assessment. Then once you're engaging, the number one thing other than that compliance report that you should be getting out of a pen test is more budget. So you work with your pen tester and say, hey, I know you're going to find a lot of stuff. Here's something I know is wrong, and I want you to find it. I want you to exploit that problem so I can show the CEO this is what would have happened if an actual attacker had come at us. And this is how much money we would have lost if it happened. So get your budget by proving that you were right in the first place. Because that's one of the hardest things, right? We're all accused of being Chicken Little and saying the sky is falling. A pen tester can actually prove out your point in a day. Every assessment should be a purple team exercise, by the way. Who remembers back here when some of the first pen tests were going on, they were like, we're not going to tell the blue team, and we're going to see if they notice it, right? That's stupid. You want the blue team sitting right there and the red team going, hey, so I just exploited the system. Did you see that? And if the blue team says, fuck no, we didn't see that. What did you do? Show me what you did, right? That is the proper way to engage a red team. That is what you want your pen test doing, is acting as a training exercise for those folks. We already talked about correct scope and insist on quality output. The output from a pen tester shouldn't be, here's your problems, right? It should be a detailed description of your problems and how to mitigate them, so that you're not guessing. A lot of people also make this mistake. So again, when pen tests were first started off, they were like, we're not going to tell the pen tester anything about our organization and just see what they can get to, right? All you're doing is testing how good the pen tester is. You're not testing the security of your own systems very well, because they're going to get in. Why have them waste 3 days trying to figure out the way in? Instead, I would say give them a box. Give them access to a standard user workstation configured like everybody else's, and let them see what they can get to with that foothold. Because the foothold's always going to happen. Why waste a couple of days in pen testing seeing if the perimeter is secure when they're not going to come in 70% of the time, maybe more, through the perimeter? They're going to come in through what? they're going to come in through phishing, right? Especially at a smaller org. They might come in through the web apps. So yeah, you want to test the web apps, but you don't want to sit there and be all secret squirrel and see if they can actually get into your organization. They're gonna. And then if you need to step up your game, going into something like a translucent box, where once you've started closing up some of those holes, give them a little bit and then see what they can do when you're ready to up it. But that transparent box for your first couple of engagements is probably a better choice. How many people have had someone try to sell them Zero Trust in the last couple? Yeah. Zero Trust is not a fucking tool. It's a process, right? There are tools that can help with it. But at the end of the day, Zero Trust starts with things like deploying MFA for everybody. Too often the biggest mistake I see is, well, we're going to give the admins MFA, right? But not like HR. Why would we want it there, or not in accounts payable or something like that? You need to get it to everybody, and that includes your third-party vendors as well. Just doing simple things like, you're not going to be able to log everything, but logging privileged credential sessions might be a perfect place to start. Secure remote access is going to be big, and some of the ways you can cut down a lot of problems is just with something as basic as an old school jump box. They're calling privileged access workstations now, and that's it's a little bit of a change on the jump box, but still a very effective and cheap way to control access down to one place where you can log, right? Maybe you can't log the whole org, but you can at least log that system. That should be the only system that's getting privileged access. And then some basic auditing criteria. Again, if you're under any compliance restrictions, are going to be necessary anyway. But things like auditing just the privileged access creds can do a world of good. I highly recommend finding ways to automate everything. Most small organizations could really be helped by automating a lot of their processes, including the security processes. So hire someone that can automate various things within the organization, including what the security team is doing. A good scripter could probably do a lot of this work. Again, you might want to look at some of those Linux admins who you've got over there with some free cycles. And then finally, we can talk about the big shiny boxes. So, lots of people are starting to leverage cloud, but they're only leveraging cloud for the money-making shit. They're forgetting about all the other stuff that comes sometimes free with their cloud services, including things like AWS WAF and Google Cloud Armor. Literally, they have that at their disposal. They're not even turning it on. Who here had to do backups to tape back in the day? Oh my God, was that the most painful frickin' thing ever? How often would it fail on you and it would, oh my God. Or all of a sudden you found out that the backup got too big for the tape, but you didn't get the warning that you needed to put it. Yeah, it was terrible. You can now make backups so easy and so cheap. It can be completely automated. There's no reason now to not be backing up every critical system to an S3 bucket somewhere. Make sure the S3 bucket's freaking secure, maybe with MFA. But this is the number one resilient motion that a small company can make against things like ransomware. Right? If you can't do anything else, MFA and then frickin' backups will save your ass time and time again. And yet, small organizations, these things are not nearly as expensive as some of those big security tools we implement, but it will do so much for little organizations. If all you can do is those two things, my God. And then things like clean images that get regularly reloaded. So anybody that gets a foothold in maybe loses their foothold. And then the whole concept of chaos engineering. It's cool. It's not something you're going to do right out of the gate, but it could be a goal to work for. So in the IT world, security and chaos engineering, which Netflix really has been forefront of. They created a tool called Chaos Monkey that you can do, and they've got several books on it. But the whole idea with Netflix was, we're going to just randomly break shit and the company better stay operational, right? No matter what we break, people should still be able to get their videos. And that really, really helps build resiliency. Security chaos engineering is similar, except instead of breaking things, you start injecting flaws into things. Maybe you have an account with too much access, or maybe you have a password in an S3 bucket that shouldn't be there, something like that. And then you test using a red team or whatever to see how far you can get with that flaw. It's an interesting concept, maybe not right out of the gate, like I said, but you can start trying to break your security in the same way that IT teams break their IT. I was sitting and talking with Lynn Tile and the accidental CISO about some trends that we've been seeing. And really, quite honestly, for a small organization, if you just want to reduce that attack surface footprint down as small as you possibly can, you can do it in 2 steps. Get rid of every freaking user system that's Windows or Mac or whatever, and just get Chromebooks. Because the attack surface in Chromebook is so much smaller than Windows OS and Mac OS. And then get rid of Active Directory. In a small org, 9 times out of 10, you probably don't need Active Directory, right? Just something like Okta, as long as they're not being compromised themselves, or Ping or something like that, because Active Directory is a fucking bitch to manage, and it's way too easy to have flaws in there that get overlooked, especially as the organization changes over time. You'll forget about shit, you'll forget about accounts, and they will have your ass in 2 seconds because of that thing you forgot in Active Directory. So for a small org, really think about it. If you don't need it, get rid of it. Another thing a little bit further, well, I don't know. I like deception tactics, and I like using them to get more budget. Again, just like that pen tester that we want to prove our point, simple, free, or very cheap, but almost everything here on this list is something you could do for free, are a great way to get budget by proving that you've got a problem in the first place. One of the easiest deception tactics is something like a honey file. So you get together with like the one IT person that you have, and you say, hey, listen, on the golden image, I want deep down in the file system, don't have it where people are going to notice it. I want a file called something password list. And all you're going to do is set up, just using simple, if you've got Windows still, just using simple Windows monitoring, just monitor for access to that one file throughout your whole organization. If someone tries to access password list, there's a good chance that it's an attacker, because if attackers see something like password list on a system, oh hell yeah, they cannot resist it. It's like freaking catnip to them. They see something like that, and they're on their bellies playing with password lists. So getting something like that is super easy to implement and super easy to detect without hardly lifting a finger. You want to go a little bit further than that, maybe something like a fake domain admin account. You put you literally if you're still talking Windows Active Directory, you put a fake password in the description. You literally say, the password for this account is blah. Attackers will see that and go, all right, this is the dumbest MCSE I've ever come across, but thank God, because that data is going to get pulled back when they do some sort of Active Directory scraping and try to pull back all those accounts. That will be in the description that they get back from something like Kerberos or something like that. You add it to the admins group, but you make the logon hour 0, so it literally cannot be used. And just alert if that one account gets used in the organization. It's either an attacker or someone who really wants admin access so they can see their cat videos today, right? It's not going to be anything else in most cases. With the honey file, you do have to make sure like your AV is not scanning it, and your vulnerability scanners aren't touching that file as well. And then more advanced things like a honey database or a honey table. How much time are we doing? Yeah, we've still got a couple minutes. Is Is anybody actually a database admin? Oh, thank God. So they're just such prima donnas, right? Oh, you can't put any sort of monitoring on my database because it's going to kill my eye. No. So instead of putting something like database access monitoring, which you probably can't afford anyway, just do something like create a fake honey table. Call it credit cards or something like that, right? Something juicy, something that your organization would value, and that's why an attacker's attacking you, is to get that information. Again, just alert on simple access to that table. Make sure that you and only maybe 1 or 2 domain database admins know about it. Don't publish the schema or anything like that. Good hit. And then I've seen even people go as far as creating honey people. Create some LinkedIn profiles that are like HR people on LinkedIn for your organization, and see, or accounts payable is another good one, and see if people start trying to catfish those fake accounts. It's a great way to just indicate someone's coming after us, and they're probably not going to stop here at LinkedIn either. It's just a great piece of your own threat intel that you can build in 2 seconds. So the good news is while most security tools are really built for the big boys, right, and girls, there are a lot of new tools that I'm seeing coming out, like EDR designed for a small to medium enterprise that are actually doing a good job. Password vaults that are easy to manage. Teaching people how to use one may not be as easy, but they do exist. There's some good, very cheap threat intelligence that'll do the job of a threat intel team, the basics, but do it very well without you having to hire a whole threat intel team. Come talk to me about it if you're interested in any of those things. But here's some helpful links for you. Thank you very much, Minneapolis, for having me here and SecretCon. It's been great, and I think maybe we have time for one question. Yes. Oh, FireCall. FireCall is usually, there are tools for it. I think one of the best known ones is like CyberArk. But FireCall is when you have a very, very high access account that should only be used in an emergency. It's that account is usually kept either physically in a safe in like 2 envelopes or something like that, or in a tool like CyberArk or something like that. Thanks. You bet. Anybody else? All right, I won't steal any time from the next presenter. Thank you very much.